Now, our panelists today, you've met me, and like I said, I'm sitting in the middle there on that side. Really delighted to have with us as well Dr. Gavin Lind, who is our Chief Executive Officer here at the Mining and Automotive Skills Alliance, so that's fantastic. And Gavin's joining us from Canberra. And then beaming in from Sydney is Ian Price, who we're really privileged to have as our chair of our Automotive Strategic Workforce Advisory Panel here at Osmasa. And Ian is with the MTA in New South Wales looking after their training arm. So welcome, Gavin, welcome, Ian. It's fantastic to have both of you available to share this virtual stage with me, and look forward to engaging after our little high-level presentation in a moment when we open it up to the panel to explore some of the key themes. Okay, speaking of which, and I'm actually running on time, which is great. So without any further ado, I thought I'll just, as best as you can in 15 minutes, unpack some of the high-level themes and highlights of our 2024 Workforce Plan. It did get launched just a couple of weeks ago. A lot of work went into that, so a big shout out not only to the team here at Osmasa that helped make that a reality, but all of the stakeholders, both government, employers, unions, everyone that helped contribute to the content of the Workforce Plan. Little bit of bedside reading there for you, all 209 pages of riveting material. Now, noting that that also covers off on the mining industry. When you do go to our website, you can download the plan in its entirety, but you can also download just the automotive segment if that is of benefit to you. A big step up for us this year from our initial workforce plan, I hope you will agree, is our better use of visualization of the data. And there is a rich source of data that is available, and we try to collate that in an easily digestible manner. In the time that we have today, we really only will have a look at some very high level data. But there's a lot of graphs, figures, tables, so please avail yourself to that. I'm not going to stay on this screen too long because we're going to dive into some of the themes in a moment anyway. The one thing I will say that is important to understand when you do look at our workforce plan for the mining or the automotive industry is that we've aligned ourselves to the use of ANZIC, or the Australian and New Zealand Standard Industry Classification System. That allows us to really ring fence the areas that we're responsible for, and it allows us by using ANZIC to hone into those areas and get more granular data. So we just refer to that as our ANZIC-based workforce plan backbone. And you'll see at the bottom of this slide, as far as the automotive industry is concerned, the areas that we're responsible for are quite sort of located in separate different divisions and subdivisions within ANZIC. So it took a little bit of work to make sure we pull all of them together so that we can have our three key sub-industries being automotive manufacturing, the wholesale and retail trade for automobiles and parts, and the largest one you can see there being the automotive repair and maintenance. But in total, we're looking at around 320,000 workers that are being represented by Osmasa from a workforce planning point of view, and obviously then also to support the training needs of that workforce. So what you see on the screen now has been lifted directly out of the workforce plan. This is one of many, many dashboards, and this is one that's obviously fairly high level. This is looking at the automotive industry workforce at the highest level of all 320,000. Within the workforce plan, we do go into greater detail, and you can actually see what that looks like for, say, automotive manufacturing or repair and maintenance if you want to get greater detail. But even at a high level, we can see that the workforce has generally been reasonably steady over the previous years. It's interesting to note that whilst the occupational worker population has been reasonably steady, our vehicle fleet, our Australian vehicle fleet, has of course continued to grow. So that is putting pressure on the workforce. And I suppose the reason why the workforce probably hasn't grown as much as it probably would have liked to is because of one of the key themes that we're going to look at today, and around skills shortages. So the demand is certainly there, but what you're seeing there is that there's probably only a slight uptick in growth, and if the industry could, it probably would have liked to have grown much greater. 18% of the workforce is female, and that is certainly an area that we will circle back around to shortly with the panel as we look at diversity and untapped opportunity there to help grow the industry by attracting more women to it. From a median age point of view, you can see we're pretty much spot on with the average national workforce. In regard to Gen Z, or the younger workforce, the automotive industry actually doesn't do all too bad, slightly better than the national average. And that's, you can see that in the bottom graph there, the histogram graph there as well, from the age and gender distribution. Given the propensity of the automotive industry to be very reliant on trades, it's not surprising that a lot of the new entrants into the industry generally come after high school or at a young age to undertake an apprenticeship. So that's not looking too bad. And at the other end as well, pretty much close to the national average in regard to the proportion of the workforce that is approaching a retirement age. You can see there that the automotive industry is actually very heavily reliant on the vocational education and training sector, with over half of the workforce being trained or qualified under the vocational system, and only about 11% at a university level, if you like, which is pretty significantly much lower than the national average. And also in the area of First Nations, really probably underperforming a little bit. By demographical distribution, the workforce is generally closely aligned to Australia's population distribution, as you would generally expect, given that where the population is also where the vehicle fleets tend to be, and where the vehicle fleets are, that's where you will sell and service and repair them. So no real surprise there. Now, as I mentioned earlier, by using ANZIC, we can then overlay the boundaries that we create with ANZIC with another classification system called ANSCO, which is what you're seeing on the left-hand side there. And ANSCO is the Australian and New Zealand standard classification for occupations. And this now starts giving us the opportunity to actually have a look at, well, you know, out of that 320,000 workers in the automotive industry, what is that made up of? And what we've listed there is just the top 20, but you'll see it very quickly narrows down. And not entirely surprising, at the very top, you see motor mechanics. Now, before the chat lights up with accusations that I'm using the wrong term, we will circle back around to that as well, because we are fully aware that within industry, we have been using the term of automotive technician for quite some time now. But when we report our data from the likes of ANSCO, we do actually have to use the nomenclature that is used within. And for anyone that has been following the ANSCO review, we will hopefully be seeing that nomenclature change fairly soon to reflect the industry norm of how we refer to our occupations. But nonetheless, automotive technicians at the top there make up the largest proportion of the workforce, followed by salespeople, and then you can see it sort of break down. Probably the key note here, and remembering that in the workforce plan, there are additional dashboards like this, but in more granular level at the sub-industry level, is wherever you see these little blue little exclamation marks next to an occupational title, and I'll come back to that one orange one, it basically means that the government has recognised that that particular occupation is experiencing a skills shortage. And the orange one is just a reflection that that skills shortage is predominantly limited to the regional areas, not within metropolitan areas. But nonetheless, you can see that, you know, out of the top 20 occupations, a fair few of them, not surprising to those of us in the industry, we're really struggling to fill. Now, on the right-hand side, through quite a interesting model that was developed by Jobs and Skills Australia and the Victorian University, you'll see what the projected growth rates are over the coming years, and down the bottom in regard to where they believe the industry will grow to from a workforce point of view by 2033. Now, importantly, what that model doesn't do is suggest that that will meet actual demand. The model is predicting what it believes the industry is actually capable of growing to, and it is entirely possible that if the industry had been able to attract additional staff, it would have grown beyond that. So there is still a disparity potentially between demand for workers and what the model is suggesting is potentially realistically achievable for the industry to go to. Now, in order to try and make up a little bit of time here, I'm going to go quick, but I just thought I would show this one dashboard as well from the plan, just reminding us, I suppose, of the makeup of Australian vehicle fleet. There's just shy of 22 million vehicles on our roads. And when you have a look at the current state of their makeup by, if you like, by fuel type, you'll see that petrol and diesel is obviously still quite dominant. Now, we are beginning to see, EV models or electric vehicles and especially hybrid vehicles really show an uptick in regard to sales, and they will continue to make an impact. But noting here the importance that we will be dealing with a mixed fleet of electric and internal combustion engine vehicles for quite some time, even as electric and hybrid vehicles continue to, make their mark felt. The reality is the current makeup is, heavily dominated by fuels. There's one EV model in the top 10 selling car models of 2023, and you can see there at position number 6, and that is the Tesla Model Y. Interestingly is that the top 3 selling vehicle types in Australia are all diesel dual cab utes in the Ford Ranger, Hilux, and then the D-Max. You can see that Tesla still has quite a significant market share in regard to the electric vehicles, but you are beginning to see additional choice and certainly different price points beginning to come into play. So this, as well as a data set that we will continue to monitor in future workforce plans, because it has a direct bearing in regard to the skills that are needed by the workforce to support our vehicle fleet. So if I had to try and sum up in the brief moment we have the key themes and trends that emerged through the workforce planning process in 2024 for automotive industry, it would be captured on this slide at an extremely high level. But at the very top, we know that we are struggling with skills shortages. There is definitely unmet demand for workers within the automotive industry, so that has to be at the very top. We know that the industry is also dealing with community perceptions that may well be quite outdated, and it's also still a very male-dominated industry, which is creating some challenges in the diversity space. Skilled migration is certainly a theme that came through in this year's plan as we continue to engage with industry, and certainly some of the challenges of fully being able to utilise a skilled migration system to help meet some of that demand. An area that we'll be circling back to in a moment and discussing in a little bit more detail is the importance of mentorship and learning support. Now, as I indicated, the automotive industry is very, very heavily reliant on the apprenticeship system to get new entrants in. A lot of effort goes into trying to attract people to our industry, and unfortunately, we still almost lose 1 in 2 apprentices that we've put a lot of effort into attracting. So we'll come back to that. International students, interesting conversation. You might be surprised at how many international students actually do study in the automotive space, but there's definitely some concerns that have continued to be raised by industry in relation to the quality of some of the training that the international students are receiving and how suitable and ready they are to actually integrate into the workforce once they complete. And needless to say, battery electric and hydrogen vehicles will be is a huge transformation for the automotive industry, and one that we're obviously working very closely with industry to ensure that we support with the appropriate training products. But also, finally, with advanced technologies, exciting for the industry, but we're seeing, through ADAS, advanced driver assistance systems and the like, a lot more high-tech technology coming into the sector. But that also then needs to be managed. So those are the key themes, in a snapshot. We will make the slide deck available to everyone after the presentation. So if I go very quickly over these next couple of slides, it's only just to plant some of those additional thoughts with you. I can't give them the full justice, but I will share these slide decks with you. From a skills shortage point of view, and you'll see some snippets here from the workforce plan, our colleagues at the AAA have already indicated that really the industry is probably lacking close to 40,000 technicians, about 27,000 experienced ones. The industry like to have if they could get them, and it's about 12,500 apprentices short. Capricorn Society's State of the Nation report also surveyed its members and found that, on average, it was taking 6 to 8 months to fill a vacancy. And what you're finding then, that the automotive industry is made up largely of owner-occupiers or small businesses and franchisees, and that impacts them. They can't take time off. They take up additional, workload, and then the owners of these small businesses are really feeling the impact of that. And some of the research done by the Motor Trades Association as well was finding that the fill rate within the industry of its vacancies was only sitting at around 39%. And in context, that's 28% below what government uses, being 67% is the threshold that government uses to determine whether an occupational shortage exists. So when we say that we have got skills shortages in the automotive industry, it's not just on the verge of being in shortage, it really is an issue. Part of the challenge as well that we explore in the workforce plan is around pay. And the challenge is that an automotive apprentice earns about $40,000 per year, which is a fair bit below other apprenticeship streams. And even then when they graduate, a light vehicle automotive technician will generally earn less than, say, plumbers and electricians and the like. So even if you've succeeded in winning a young person over to the notion that they should do a trade, even within that, there's competition where they've got a lot of different trade opportunities that they could be pursuing. We obviously would love to have them in the automotive industry, but certainly pay and conditions do come up, and even employers note that that is a concern for them. Okay, moving on very quickly. Community perceptions and diversity. I indicated that before. We potentially are dealing with the challenges of some quite outdated views of our industry, where people tend to think that it's still, dirty, oily, and unsophisticated. Now, we know that that's not the case, but there's work to be done for us to really undo that thinking. And you'll see that on these slides as well, we've got some areas of focus there, which are lifted from our workforce plan, which is our way of letting you know that, hey, Osmasa is going to take a closer look at this as well. Automotive industry, very male-dominated, great untapped opportunity in regard to being able to attract more women, but we've got some real challenges, including outside of our immediate control, where even family and friends, peers will try to dissuade women from potentially considering a career in the automotive industry. Statistics show that those that do join generally are really, really satisfied and happy with their choice. And then there is more work to be done as well in addressing the pay gap. That's a fairly complicated topic. I won't be able to do that justice now, but at least I would like you all to know that it is on our radar. Skilled migration is not probably doing as heavy lifting as what the automotive industry would like to do, but it does play an important role, and you'll see that 29% of vacancies were eventually filled via a visa sponsorship, and that goes up fairly high, especially for vehicle bodybuilders, where it's in a very important mechanism, yet the feedback from industry continues to be that it's a complex and a costly cumbersome process to do it. And then we know that we've got the broader economic challenge of actually having to find housing and accommodation for people. So that is a complex area, but it's certainly one that is on our radar. I won't spend too much time here because I want to let Ian talk to this in a moment, but we're very acutely aware that mentorship and learning support is really critical. So much effort goes into attracting people. Unfortunately, anecdotally, everyone is so busy and everyone's trying to do much more with less that the feeling from many stakeholders when we engaged with them was actually that apprentices are maybe not getting the amount of support and mentorship as they may have been, and that's leading to a higher attrition rate. So really looking forward to unpacking that and also getting feedback from people who are on the webinar. International students, the challenge here is that actually a fair chunk of the student population is international. So over a quarter, 27%, And then when you go beyond the certificate 3 and you look at some of the other quals like the certificate 4 and the diploma, you see there, some of those quals are being almost entirely being utilised by international students. But certainly industry has raised some significant concern given that some of these students complete the certificate 3, for example, in a year, whereas a domestic student would do it over 4 years in an apprenticeship. And there's definitely concerns around whether international students are getting enough workplace experience and exposure to on-the-job actual learning, which then becomes a challenge when they graduate. Again, a complex area, but would be important to let you know that we are on top of it. Battery and electric and hydrogen vehicles. Obviously, it's a huge part of where industry is going. So not surprisingly, you see a lot of areas of focus there on your screen. Wells Master is working closely with our industry colleagues to advance that, and we'll be opening probably with that in a moment, because the challenge here is that industry is probably still not feeling entirely ready for what's coming. A fair bit of work needs to go on in regard to how do we support the training. At the moment, there is an EV specific certificate 3, and we know that we've got the traditional certificate 3 for light vehicle technology, which is very much focused on internal combustion. And it'll be an interesting journey to go on with industry to see how we can actually work on getting a qualification that prepares people for a mixed vehicle fleet future. And finally, before I finish, and I indicated this earlier, is this notion of advanced technologies, or ADAS. Really exciting, and it certainly brings a lot more technology and excitement for those that are working in the industry, but also from a challenge to make sure that our training is fit for purpose is something that we're working really closely with our stakeholders to ensure that the training system is there to support the industry as we take on board more and more technologies. So that brings us to our topics of discussion. Now, what I might do, I might stop sharing so that you can see some of our other panel colleagues. And obviously we've got Gavin. So Gavin, great to see you. And we have Ian somewhere. I believe our great producers here are going to be activating Ian for us as well, so that he's good to go. Gavin, thank you for joining us. I know you're beaming in from Canberra as well.
Thank you. Yes, from the land of the Ngunnawal people, Jan, and also the nation's capital of electric vehicles, I'm led to believe.
Awesome. No, great. So my first question for the panel is actually to Ian. Now, I indicated earlier, Ian is our chair of the Automotive Strategic Workforce Advisory Panel. And so delighted to have Ian here. Now, one of the things that we discussed ever so briefly a second ago was this notion of, electric vehicles. It's a massive transformation piece for the industry. But some of the statistics and the surveys are certainly indicating that industry doesn't feel as prepared as, I guess, what they would hope. And so I'd love to hear from Ian in regard to, coming from the Motor Trades Association, what does that look like for industry? What more needs to happen? What are the challenges from an industry's perspective in embracing this, transformation for the industry? What more needs to happen for industry to feel prepared? And I suppose, especially from a training perspective, what does a vocational education and training system need to do to support this transformation?
Thanks, Jan, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to the panel and to all the participants today. So good afternoon to all. Yeah, look, obviously it's a very, very broad question, and one in which, it's been a very topical debate within the MTA for some time now. And, let's not forget that the industry, has been aware of electric vehicles for some time in forms of, hybrids. We've had those for, over 10, 15 years now, etc. And slowly introduction of electric vehicles coming through. But every other state is slightly different, coming from a New South Wales perspective, where licensing requirements are first and foremost the biggest driver of education and qualifications. And certainly, you know, when we discuss with our other colleagues in each state, you know, everyone has been delivering at some form of what they're, but in history, obviously, OEMs have done the heavy lifting in the very beginning. Obviously, you know, that's not accredited to a qualification, but, you know, I guess their technicians have been exposed to it in some form over the years. But to your point about is industry ready? Well, you know, obviously there's many other workshops that haven't had that chance and opportunity to attend any training. So there's been a steady increase across each state. Involvement and intrigue into EV training is certainly around the depower and reinitialize units. So there are, if everyone knows, 3 skill sets that have been out there for some time. You know, obviously everyone has delivered certain units out of those qualifications in some way, shape or form. So we've been working behind the scenes as MTAA and other industry providers to go back to the government and fair trading, certainly in New South Wales, and talk to them about, you know, what's appropriate, what's an appropriate level for technicians to be able to be aware, safe, comfortable in working around pure, full battery electric vehicles. The uptake, like I said, has been quite slow in New South Wales. Can't talk for every other state because they've had different levels of success. But certainly, one of the biggest driving factors is obviously the funding models around that. Industry can't keep on footing the bill for this education that's needed. You know, there's time down from employers, loss of productivity, you know, and then having to pay the course on top of that is a big factor in those enrollments. And I think once the government has come to some form of agreement on that, I think we'll start to see a much more healthy level of interest. And there's a lot to learn from all of this, especially about tooling. There's special tools that are required when certainly working on battery electric high voltage vehicles, and all the safety equipment that is around that. So unless they come onto the training and are exposed to that, we certainly do that in our training. We certainly show them on the first course, the EV1 course, we call it, you know, the safety tools, the processes, the checks and measures, the double checks that you should be doing to make sure that that vehicle is safe and you're comfortable in working around it. So, you know, it's a very, very big question and I could talk forever on this, but there's lots of factors involved that are stopping industry and getting ready and pure ready for it straight away.
And, you know, thanks, Ian. And, you know, like you said before, it is costly. And I believe the MTAA has done some modelling around it costing about $5,000 to $7,000 to upskill an existing, you know, technician to support electric vehicles. And you're right, it is a topic that we could spend almost 2 hours dedicated to. But thank you so much for that overview, Ian. I really appreciate that. Gavin, I'd love to ask you a quick question, if I may. And look, we know that the automotive industry, look, much like the mining industry, is still very male-dominated workforce. We don't really have the level of female participation I think that we would like, and yet we find ourselves in a situation where we've got significant skills shortages. And on top of that, quite frankly, we know that research shows that a diversified workforce actually brings many benefits. As an industry, how can we attract and encourage and importantly retain more women to join our automotive workforce?
Thanks, Jan. And Ian, thanks for joining our panel, and to all those that joined the webinar today. It's fantastic to see you all. Jan, you said something earlier in the webinar already. You gave the figure of 18% of the workforce in automotive is female. That's a very low number, you know, considering that, you know, the half the economic workforce are female. So it's one of those things that we've got to really think through around unemployment in Australia, but think 3.6, 3.5% thereabout. So there's a lot of people in work already. So when we think about attracting to an industry specifically, it's got to be about the benefits of what a lifelong opportunity might look like. So I've had the benefit, Jan, of seeing some of the work we as Osmasa are doing on the perceptions or youth perceptions of automotive careers. I've seen the draft report for this. So all those on the webinar, you can look forward to seeing what this looks like. But some insights to that are also not that dissimilar to work we did on Gen Z perceptions of mining. And that is that fundamentally, first and foremost, young people don't understand enough about the industry to make an informed choice about what opportunities there are. And once they get to know a bit more about the industry, such as Ian just described about electrification, about being part of a net zero conversation, I think then there's an activation about, oh, I didn't realize there were these jobs that connected to those values. So young people have a very values-based decision-making process. And the reason we are investing in this research now is they will be, Gen Z that is, will be the senior leaders of this industry 15 to 20 years from now. So they're the ones that are going to be making decisions. And we've got to, explain to this generation the risks we're taking on their behalf. So why are we electrifying? Why are we taking this route of, the net zero conversation? So you mentioned another thing, Jan. You said, oh, we know it's called a technician, not a mechanic, but we report it as a mechanic. There's a significant clue. It's the language is so important. So if we are saying to someone that, oh, there's this outdated career you can go into, when in fact it is a contemporary career, it is something interesting, it is something fun. But more importantly, Jan, it's about stepping someone through going, I am you in 1 year's time as an apprentice. I am you in 4 years' time as, a young tradesperson. I am you in 10 years' time as the supervisor. I'm you in 15 years' time as Ian, the policy director of the MTA New South Wales. So I think it's about showing careers, about talking about it honestly, and looking at peer role models, and particularly upping that 18% of women. You've said there's many benefits. The one thing I'll say to you is a diverse workforce is a safer workforce fundamentally.
Thanks, Gavin. And look, thank you. The one omission I suppose I made when I introduced that figure, you may recall, was that that's at the highest level. That's looking at the entire automotive industry. The bulk of the female participation is within administration, admin and sales type roles. Within the workforce plan, which I know everyone online has read, when you go down to the trade specific role, so within automotive repair and maintenance, that number just plummets right down. So yeah, a little bit of work ahead for us, but thank you so much, Gavin. I appreciate that. Ian, I mentioned briefly in my initial overview, some of the conversations that we have heard throughout the country around the importance of mentoring our apprentices, giving them the opportunity to learn properly and have exposure to the various different things that they're learning. The flip side is, many different anecdotal and direct feedback from some of the roundtables that we've held is that, look, everyone is so busy that the time is not always there to provide the level of mentoring that maybe industry would like to. And also we then sometimes see a situation where apprentices are maybe being asked to do things that they may not feel fully prepared for, or in a very monotonous way. They're not getting the breadth of practice. And certainly one of the things that we've also then heard is that this expectation of mentorship tends to be pushed back a little bit to the education providers. With yourself, we've got the great benefit of you are a private training provider, but you are also an industry association. Could you maybe shed some light on this important topic and what you think may need to happen to improve on it?
Thanks, Jan. Look, the workforce plan outlines a lot of this, and it's an interesting read around it. But some years ago, the government did support and provide funding for workplace mentoring, and the trend and indication shows that that was very successful. And then, unfortunately, that funding subsided, and hence we're in the situation once again where employers and students necessarily aren't getting the right information and understanding the requirements and the obligations of each party. And I know this is part of the enrollment process, the induction process, which we go through because we've recognized that, and we put that as part of our trainers' obligations. And like I said, it does get pushed across because businesses are time poor. The lack of workforce bodies out there to keep the workflows through the workshop. Time is very, very precious to those small employers. Necessarily don't have HR departments where they can get support and help to deal with situations that arise. So it is very important, and it's a big factor in one that we look at our leaver rates quite extensively, and we understand some of the touch points that cause situations to happen which could have been negated. And we learn from that, and we contact the students regularly and employers and try to mitigate these situations. But it's time and effort, and it's from an RTO, it's a big pain point for us because we're obviously out there trying to deliver training, and then hence we've got this extra added, not burden, but job role to navigate these students through these difficult times. And employers also, as MTA, we offer ER support to our members. So the job is all encompassing when it's trying to make sure that completion happens with that student and they're happy to continue on in the industry. So it's an ever evolving situation. But for me, I think the government does need to recognize that this has a huge factor in completion rates and employment opportunities. And we certainly don't want to see people leaving the industry because they've had a bad experience or they didn't feel that they were, not supported in any way whatsoever, right? Because the automotive industry is huge. Just because you start off as a technician like myself, and you can end up in many, many jobs within the automotive industry. It's so wide. I don't believe really that we're giving that information out to those students, from the very onset, or to the parents.
Yeah. Wonderful. Look, thanks, Ian. So what I thought I might do, Gavin, I've got one more question for you, if I may, and then I thought I'll make up a minute or two and open up for the floor. So for all of our participants, have a think about what question you may want to ask. You might even want to tap away and get some of those questions through to our producers, because I'll open up to you in a moment. But Gavin, look, electric vehicles, we've already discussed. What an amazing, transformation. A lot of valuable critical minerals go into the making of electric vehicles. At the front end, it's quite resource intensive. And if we're going to really get the full value and the full benefit over the life cycle of electric vehicles, the end of life, repurposing and recycling, and how we deal with end-of-life vehicles is really, really critical. How are we placed in Australia in regard to that growing need? And I suppose what more needs to happen there so that we don't have a wasted opportunity?
So it's a great point you raise, Jan, and you can back this one up. But my understanding at the moment is that all vehicles in Australia, of course, we don't manufacture them here, Jan. So critical minerals that might be going into electric vehicles, we might mine them in Australia, but they're going offshore to be processed and then manufactured into vehicles, and then they come back to Australia for commercial use. But at the minute, my understanding is only 75% of a vehicle is actually recycled in Australia. So there's still 25% of a vehicle that is available to be done something with. Now, this is a very big stewardship issue. And you can think around, electric vehicles specifically at the minute, and you spoke about skill shortages like assessors, insurance assessors. If there's something goes wrong with an electric vehicle, the time blows out too much to get it assessed that it just gets written off when it might be a very minor issue. Now that has a very big life inside the vehicle to be done something with, let alone repurposing the battery, the lithium-ion battery that might be in there, plus the componentry, plus a nice little useless figure for you, but it is a fun one. There's 1 mile of copper end to end in a Tesla. So 1.6 kilometers worth of copper in a single string goes into a Tesla. That's a lot of copper. to do something with. So there's a stewardship opportunity in Australia, absolutely. Now, whether that becomes a new industry down the track, but I know that the MTAA has certainly said that they desire. There's some good research we put out between the FCAI and the MTAA recently about this as an opportunity to get about 95% of all vehicles recycled in Australia. So yeah, Jan, you're right. We are the Mining and Automotive Skills Alliance, so we also have that value chain stewardship bit around the digging up of things like lithium, like copper, all those other critical minerals that go into the manufacture of these vehicles, and other things like battery storage. But we also have a responsibility and a real opportunity to connecting with young people around the opportunities as to what net zero actually means, in these industries, including this stewardship piece.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gavin. All right. So look, we'll pause there. Been going easy on the panel, but maybe having given them a slight heads up of what they were going to get asked. So here's the opportunity. I don't like anyone's chances of stumping these two amazing people, but I will open up to the chat. So grateful for everyone making themselves available. Is there a question that you would like to ask? In fact, here we go. I've got some that just been handed to me. Here's, so we've got one question here, departures from workforce data. Here we go. The ANSCO, good question. I might have to answer this one then to myself. There's a question here around the ANSCO breakdown between heavy and light technicians. And that's, look, a really good point. So when we present the data in the workforce plan, and again, I'll use the old language because that's what the data says, motor mechanics general. At that level is where we get the data. So without boring anyone with too much detail, even ANSCO has different levels of granularity. And the data that you would be seeing in those dashboards are what we consider, what we call at that ANSCO 6 level. But underneath, nested in that, are all your subcategories of light vehicle technician, heavy vehicle technician, and the like. And the ANSCO data does not give us that granularity. So what we would need to then potentially infer, and we haven't done it for the 2024 one, but this is a great question from Sarah Curley. And it's something that we can take on notice and look at for the 2025 workforce plan, is that what we would need to do is look at enrolment statistics. And so go back to the training packages, and let's say that if there's, I'll keep the math simple, if there's 10,000 enrolments in, the light vehicle technician certificate 3, and there's 5,000 enrolments in the heavy, then you could infer at that, and you could even do a time series, data dive to see whether that sort of a ratio has been traditionally what the enrolments have been like. You could use that to infer what the breakdown of that motor mechanic general figure is. But yet, to your point, purely relying on the Australian Bureau of Statistics data won't give us that level of granularity yet. But certainly good to know that that is the sort of granularity that industry would be looking for. So we will absolutely take that on board. Okay, let's. I wasn't supposed to be put on the spot. These are questions for Gavin. I had to think there. Anyway, oh, great. Okay, so a question here from Gary Smiley, and to the panel, whoever would like to talk about this. But the question is, what is being done to address shortages in the vet workforce blueprint? Great point. And whilst it wasn't listed as a key theme, it is absolutely something that we do touch on in the workforce plan, which is understanding and noting and appreciating the fact that there is a shortage of trainers as well. And, it's also a chunky issue. So I'm not sure who would like to maybe have a chat about what we're doing.
Can I first say, Jan, and that's a great question. Ian, I'm going to ask you to answer this, but I just wanted to acknowledge that yesterday was TAFE Teacher or Vet Teacher, National Vet Teacher Day. And I just wanted to give a shout out to all those amazing trainers, the teachers that are out there dedicating time for, the safe, elevation of an apprentice and a trainee to get a meaningful career. But Ian, you might want to answer this one because I know it's a tricky one, but that's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, all of our trainers are from, the shop floor, because obviously they need that industry experience and, life experiences. And it is a very difficult thing to encourage somebody off the shop floor to be able to obtain the current Cert 4 and training and assessing qualification. It is very complicated. and certainly from a trades background. I myself, I'm a technician, and it's jumping straight into a Cert 4 from an industry that doesn't speak university language is not encouraging at all. So I think we've had this discussion many times in Parliament and other discussions about this qualification, and having a proper trainer assessor qualification as a start point for people to be able to get into the industry, understands what's required of them, and make them into a good trainer, as opposed to understanding the whole ASQA framework, which is very complicated and confusing at times.
And to add to that point, if you don't mind, Ian, a student's experience of something is highly, geared towards the interest and the ability of that teacher and the passion of that teacher. So, it's probably why, the MTAA or the MTAs, for example, do so well, is because they have higher retention rates because the experience for the student is so good.
Right.
Yeah, and it's important that we encourage the continuous learning of those trainers. It's very easy for them to slip into a rut of delivery and business deliverables, but keeping on top of currency, current products, we invest a lot of time and effort into our trainers to ensure that they're enthused as well and interested in the changes and in the forefront of the new technology that's hitting them on a day-to-day basis, and getting questioned from the students, quite rightly so.
Great, wonderful, thank you. I've got this one maybe, well, for anyone, but potentially Ian, yourself, and Sharon Hill had a great little comment there in the chat, just talking about, we want to increase diversity, but the lack of flexible working and or work-life balance is often seen as a barrier, especially for attracting more female participation. I know that is an area that we touched on in the workforce plan, and it really just was touched on, where you are beginning to see some industry providers sort of offer different working styles and working arrangements to try and reduce that barrier. From your perspective, Ian, especially within the MTA and the stakeholders you deal with, is that something that industry is considering in regard to changing the work hours, the flexibility capability, just to make it a little bit more welcoming, I suppose, to a broader demographic of future workers?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, because if we go back to the consumer, which is the main driver for any working hours, I presume. So, if you're expecting your car to be dropped off at 9 a.m. and pick it up after you finish work at 4 a.m., it's very restrictive for flexible hours. But there are employers now that are offering 4-day week with longer hours in those 4 days to cover people picking their cars up after hours and dropping them off early before they go to work. So industry is starting to embrace this and look at different ways in which they can attract people in to have the new lifestyle we're all come accustomed to post-COVID, right, which is causing lots of problems out there.
Right. Gavin, did you want to add anything? Or
well, I hate to say, but the mining industry is also a big user of light vehicle technicians, and they can also yes. offer a different style of working, in a FIFO or residential way, which may also have a pay differential that goes with it. But nonetheless, it's a factor.
Great. And look, we'll see how we go. I did promise to be respectful of everyone's time, and I want to make sure we show everyone the QR codes for the odd one person that hasn't read the workforce plan, because I'm sure everyone else has. But there is a really good question here from Robin Kuhn. I hope I'm pronouncing that surname correctly, Robin. If not, my apologies. And this is around the notion of apprenticeships. It's obviously something that has been around for a long time, but the question from Robin really is it an aged concept? Is it going to be difficult to ask a young person to commit 4 years to an apprenticeship? Yes, they're earning while they're learning, but I suppose at a low rate. And is there an opportunity to further embrace a competency-based progression model to help in that area? So I'm not sure if anyone in particular would like to tackle that. to finish off on, an easy one for you, Ian.
Go on, Gavin, you can answer that one. No?
No, you go. I think
Okay.
that's
Look, we can talk all day about pay differentiations and apprenticeship rates and different trades paying different award rates, which are encouraging students in other paths. It's an ever revolving door, which we discuss a lot about. And obviously, Gavin touched on that there are other trades that, or other industries, mining, for example, which offer very attractive rates for people. But as far as enticing people to come into the automotive industry and the qualifications that surround that, obviously depending on the state, i.e. New South Wales is heavily licensed, as you know, so there is very little movement around, flexibility around that. But, every other state have the opportunity to be able to, introduce them into as a cert to encourage them and progress them through their learning. And that's something that we've always embraced. And I'm a great advocate for the pre-apprenticeship courses, which are a good try and taste. We do a lot of SBAT students, school-based students, which is a great entry into the automotive industry or any trade, and a good test for the employer for that student, because they have them over that period of time, sometimes 2 years. So it's a great recruitment tool also. So, I encourage sort of the SBAT as a great platform and pathway to encourage these students whilst their parents are still giving them direction and in their ear about which way they should go in their career. But certainly that helps enticing them into the industry.
Yeah.
And to support that, Ian, you got to start somewhere. And yes, money is an issue, and I think what you don't want is the other factors like rent and these kinds of things, where a young person is really feeling stretched about paying rent and having been on the award rate. But it's not going to be like that forever for the young person. And I think it's also a rites of passage in some way, but it has to be a livable wage. And I think we have to keep advocating for something to be done to make this attractive.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Look, mindful 2 minutes to go. But can I firstly start? Ian and Gavin, thank you both so much. From literally 3 corners of Australia, we've come together. Really appreciate your insights, and for everyone that has joined us as well. Probably the important thing that I would want to just sort of share is that there's been some amazing questions in the chat, and I've been keeping an eye on them, and we just haven't had the time to get through to all of them. And that's not to suggest that those are not really important. Leslie, I saw the question you've put in there. That's a really, really important one. So can I just encourage everyone, please continue to engage with us at Osmar. That's exactly what we're here for. Reach out to us, keep the conversation going. Up on your screen, you'll see the 3 different QR codes. On the left is if you want the full plan, all 209 pages of bedtime reading. If you're sort of saying, mining, who needs it? Let's just go auto, then go the middle one. But also, really importantly, the QR code on the right will take you to our survey mechanism, where we'd love to hear from you as to exactly with what's been in this chat. What else should we be looking at? What could we have done better? Or let us know if you think we have done well within the workforce plan on addressing something. And the feedback mechanism allows you to be really specific. You can actually drill down to a particular chapter or section and say, hey, in this section, I think you missed the mark, or would love you to go a little bit deeper next time. So please do provide us with that feedback. It's really, really valuable. Other than that, we're dead on 12 o'clock here in Perth, but 2 o'clock on the east, and maybe anywhere else in between, all the other time zones. But thank you again on behalf of Gavin, Ian, and myself, and the whole team of Adults Master. Appreciate you making the time and for participating. And we really look forward to maintaining that conversation so that we can work together to improve the VET system to help support the industry. So thank you so much, everyone. We will make a recording available, and we look forward to engaging with you all very soon. Thank you.